So welcome to our Build Talk, Design for Developers. My name is Tom Eddings, and this is my colleague Dave Crawford. We are both design leads in the Modern Apps team in the UK. We work with some of Windows Phone and Windows top partners, including Facebook, Pandora, Spotify. More recently, we work with Beats Music on their app for Windows Phone. And today we're going to talk to you, I'm going to give you a practical guide on building a brand in XAML. So whether you're working with a big company with brand guidelines or having to invent your own brand, we're going to teach you some fast and simple tips to help your app stand out from the crowd. Question?
Cool. So I'm going to start with a bit of an uncomfortable truth that you probably already know by now, but that maybe a few of you haven't quite realized this. Users are going to judge the quality of your app based on the design. Now, the really scary thing about this is that they're going to judge how fast, how performant, how stable it is without ever actually having played with the app, because before users even see your app and get to use it, this is what they see. So this is an example of a fictional store in the Windows Phone store. The user here has just searched for news, and we've only got 2 search results. Thankfully, we have more than 2 news apps in Windows Phone store these days. But as you can see, they've got 2 search results back, and already the user's going to make a decision about which app they're going to investigate further to click on through and download and install. And if you're presented with something that's professionally finished, that looks good and looks compelling, the chances are between these 2 icons, you're probably going to pick the top one to look through, rather than the one that looks like it's a piece of cheap clip art with a bit of text over the top of it. I did want to use Comic Sans, but even I couldn't do that as a designer. But let's pretend that we're one of those users who likes to evaluate everything we've got on our table before we choose. So we're going to click through both of these, and after we've read like a little description of what the app does, we'll maybe then look at the screenshots. So here we have those 2 apps. Now both of them have the exact same functionality, the exact same content on them. But again, when you're a user browsing the marketplace or browsing the store, this is going to heavily influence whether you download the app. So even if they have exactly the same content in, you're probably going to pick the one that has had some design effort put into it, rather than one that just has some controls thrown onto a page. So today we're going to try and teach you how to build a brand to stop the thing on the left-hand side from happening, but hopefully give you the tools to make it more like the one on the right-hand side.
So ultimately, design is a big deal. Users are making a decision about whether or not to download or purchase your app based on one of the elements is based on the design. And so what we want to try and talk to you about today is how you can give your app a personality. Thanks. How you give your app personality to make it stand out from the crowd and your competition. If we take a look here at the Visual Studio Windows Phone template, while it's a great foundation, it isn't very exciting. It's not going to help your app stand out from others. And what we want to do is talk to you today about how you can give this template or your app give your app some personality. And another term really for personality is branding.
So if you look at this, this is a Photoshop trickery, but it is a standard soda can. How are you going to tell what is inside that soda can? It could be 2 different flavors of cola. You don't know which one it is. The only way you can actually figure out what it's going to be is by the brand that gets applied to it. Is it going to be mainly red, or is it going to be blue and red with a white stripe going through it, for example? That will actually help to inform you how good it's going to be, what experience you expect to get from it, and things like that. Now, branding is, as we said, quite a big deal, but you may be saying to me, hang on a minute, I don't know how to do this. I'm a developer. I'm focused on building great apps, on building great features. Design's one of those things that I'm perhaps not the best skilled at. But today, we're here to help with all that.
So before we get started, we just want to do some disclaimers. Everyone loves a disclaimer. Branding is a very complex subject, and today we're going to break it down into some easy steps. So a cheat sheet, if you will. And this will enable you to get started. So we're not going to cover every element, but we've broken it down into some easy steps. What we're not trying to do is to turn you into designers, like this guy. But what we are planning to do is to give you practical crash course in how to apply an app, how to apply a brand to your Windows Phone app.
So what is a brand and why is it important? Well, we kind of covered that a little bit when we talked about the unbranded soda pop cans and how essential that is. But I'm going to take you through a short example, and I'm going to keep it brief, because as I said, we're not trying to turn designers, and this is a practical-based talk where we're naturally going to talk about principles and all that kind of thing. But I think it's good to just help illustrate what a brand is and why it's important. And for that, we're going to talk briefly through Skype, which is a recent member of the Microsoft family. And as such, is bringing with it its own kind of look and feel and integrating into Microsoft's look and feel, which is quite an interesting place for an app to be in. Now, Skype have got their own set of design guidelines and branding, which appears on our intranet. And I've stolen a couple of slides out to show you. And they actually answer the question of what is a brand. So this is taken directly from their brand guidelines at the moment, all laid out in Skype style, with the bubbles and things. And they say that a brand is an intangible asset that lives in people's hearts and minds. Now, that is typical marketing fluff, if you've ever seen it, which, again, is not very helpful to you guys who are sat in front of whatever graphics tool you've got and you're trying to build an icon for your app. One of the misconceptions, though, is that people think it's all about a logo. And it's not just about a logo. There's much more that you need to think about when building an app. If you just had one of these black template apps with a logo at the top of the page, it's still not going to feel like very much has gone into it. Skype say that great brands manage how they look, sound, and feel. It's also the experience that it gives to the end user. So there's a lot more things to think about here. So let's break this down a bit and look at what we can do to bring some of these things into an app on a more practical level. So Skype feels like Skype everywhere you see it. We don't need the logo to tell us that it's Skype. This is an example of the Windows 8 app for Skype, and you can see that there is no Skype logo anywhere on this screen at all, but you know it's Skype. You can tell from the iconography that they use for the call, the hang-up, and the video chat. You can tell from the shades of blue that they're using. You can tell from the way they use circles for people's user accounts, from the orange badge in the top corner. It all still feels like Skype without having a logo anywhere on it. When you look at the Xbox app, you can see that, again, it brings through this iconography. It brings through a similar color palette. It brings through the same font. At the top there, we do have a little logo, just because they decided to brand this particular screen. But Skype is such a powerful brand now, and it's so simple, it can actually peel it back. So here, this next screen we've got, if it clicks through, is incredibly simple. All we have on here are 4 buttons in 2 colors, and we know it's Skype. Again, it's the iconography that drives it, it's the colors that drive it, and it's the general layout and look and feel as well. On the Windows Phone app, again, we don't have a Skype logo appearing anywhere in it. Instead, we have, again, the use of the colors, we have the use of the icons, the buttons and things, but we also have these little cloud elements that kind of help say, hey, this is fun, this is Skype. So that is Skype in a nutshell.
Great, thanks, Dave. So Dave's talked about how Skype represents itself on the various properties, but we want to break that down. So let's break that down, and welcome to Branding 101. And Branding 101 is what we're going to use throughout this talk to kind of break down the branding into its various elements. So what are the things that we use to identify something as a Skype app? One of the first things that we use are the logos and icons. Skype have a collection of different logos that they use in different scenarios, so from live tiles into the app, into the calling screens. And they also have a set of icons. And these all have a consistent look and feel, so that when a user opens up a Skype app, they realize immediately that they are looking at a Skype-branded product.
So when you're working with a large brand, the chances are they will have given you a set of brand guidelines. So you're working with like a big name like NBC or Disney, for example. You will have all these assets provided to you. You just have to figure out how to take them and use them in their app. So another thing that helps identify if something is a Skype app is a set of colors. As we saw from all those screenshots, it's a consistent theme that runs through them. These 3 buttons and the in blue and the red one at the end for hanging up a call. And we can see it here across the Windows Phone, how these colors come into play and how it's consistent across every screen. So from branding the app bar to branding the chat bubbles to the buttons, we carry that same palette all the way through. And the key here to make an app feel really consistent in its structure and its layout and its look and feel is to keep that list of colors as small as possible. They become your signature colors. Skype has got this palette that it uses. It may look like it's quite a lot, but the bottom one is just a few shades of gray. And you've got to remember that Skype is across a ton of different platforms, not all of which have the rich color depth that you might get on Windows Phone or Windows 8 app. And at the top there, they have their Skype primary blue. That's the color their tile will be. It's the color that any primary brand elements will be on their page to help drive that through.
The third area that we want to talk about today is backgrounds and decoration. Skype's quite interesting in this respect because they tend to use it to make their apps feel more fun and a little less corporate. So they have these kind of logos and these silhouettes of cities. And they introduce them in quite nice ways. So again, moving away from that corporate look and feel, if we look at the Windows Phone and Windows 8 apps, you can see they just introduce these kind of small elements from their backgrounds and kind of decoration assets.
So you'll notice that they've not applied these things across the background of the entire app. It's not like a proliferation of rainbows and clouds everywhere when you open it. It's just these small hints throughout the app that help tie it all together. So another thing that Skype used to help differentiate themselves from the competition is the use of a typeface. Now this one is particularly interesting because Skype used to have their own font that they used across all their apps. And as they moved into the Microsoft family, they've adopted our typeface to help it kind of fit in with the Windows platform and feel a little bit native, but also feel a little bit like their own brand. And you can see here that they use Segoe UI, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with if you've built Windows apps, or Segoe Windows Phone on the phone, for those of you who are more phone-faced. And they use two different weights, regular Segoe UI and a lighter weight. Now, this is something that many of you who maybe work with designers will know about this, but maybe some of the more dev-focused guys in the room won't know that fonts actually come in different weights. That's how thick they are. And generally, when things are larger, you use thinner or lighter weight fonts, and when they're smaller, you use heavier weight fonts, just to make them easier to read. And it also helps to differentiate between the hierarchy in your app. And they use these typefaces across all their properties that they use. So you'll even see this in the web. You'll see everything that the Skype touches will use these fonts, again, to help bring it all together.
The fifth brand element that we want to talk to you about today, and it's kind of unique to the Skype brand, is sound. Not every brand has a distinct sound, but Skype definitely does. And so if you were to hear a Skype call come in, and you're not actually seeing any of the screens, you instinctly know that it's a Skype call just from the sound that they've created for their ringtones. So that's quite an interesting perspective from Skype about how they identify the Skype app.
So that's all very well and good, but what if you don't actually have access to brand guidelines? So for those of you in the room who are building apps for yourselves, or maybe you're building apps for small independent customers who maybe haven't got round to building brand guidelines yet, we're going to take you through a crash course now using those 5 stages we just showed you in how to create a brand in a couple of easy steps using free resources that are available on the internet, so you don't have to worry about spending hours of your time finding color palettes that don't clash and work well together. So we're going to take you through those steps now.
Before we get started on that, it might be good just to kind of get an idea of the audience. Who's put a Windows Phone app into store?
Woo!
Woo! And Windows? Great.
Cool. And how many of you in the room would class yourselves as designers? There's a few of us representing. That's good. That's what we like. And how about devs?
Well, it is designed for developers.
That's kind of what I expected. So we've got the right demographic here, which is good, yeah. It does mean we've got some design experts in the rooms as well to ask us questions. So again, we're boiling this down to its very, very simplest elements. As Tom said earlier, branding is a much more complex subject. There's much more to it. But for the sake of giving you guys some things you can take away and work with right now, we're going to define branding in its simplest terms for a Windows Phone app as having 4 or 5 of these things. As Tom said, sound is a tricky one. It's called in branding, we call it a sonic brand. If you think of Coca-Cola and McDonald's, they all have these little jingles that they associate with their brand. And when you hear them, it again reinforces it without even seeing the product, smelling it, or anything. So for the purposes of this demo, and you are going to watch some designers code, so it's got serious. Like we've opened up Visual Studio, and we're going to be cranking out some XAML.
I am, you're going to.
Well, yeah, I'm going to tell Tom what to do, and he's going to do the typing. We're going to talk about a made-up app that we've created called the Blue Yonder Flight Tracker. For those of you who came to our UX panel session earlier in the day, we talked about how the best apps are the apps that do a few things well. So we've picked up some really simple scenarios for our Blue Yonder Flight Tracker. And these are a simple app that will track a number of flights, view the airport traffic around a given airport, and read industry features such as what's going on in the airline business and that kind of stuff. So I'm now, hopefully, if I get this panel correct, going to be able to switch over to Tom to show you a look at what is a template app. So what comes out of the box and is completely blank. So the thing you might be starting with when you first start building apps.
Yay. So this is the template app. I've actually started to add some of the content, so it puts more context to the demo. So here, I've still got the logo in, so all I've done is given it a name. I've got my headers in. I've started to add some sample data. I've done that through Blend. And then I've got my watch list, the airports that I'm looking at for arrivals and departures, and then I've also got a feature section where we'll put some articles in.
So it's a very kind of plain, boring, out of template, simple kind of data app we've got going in there. Nothing particularly exciting. And we're now going to start to inject some personality from it using these steps. And like I say, there are going to be some free resources to work with as well.
One last thing is that it usually comes in the dark theme. Because our brand tends to be quite light, I've actually just moved everything into a light theme for the purpose of this demo.
Okay. So if you remember from our set of boxes that we had from our Branding 101, the first thing we're going to do is find some colors. Now, I know you're saying, like, I'm not a designer. Somebody else makes decisions about what paint goes on the wall at home. I don't know if I'm going to find some colors that work together or that clash, blah, blah, blah. Now, there are some great resources out there. There's several different ones. One of them is a website called colorlovers.com. There'll be a slide at the end with all these resources on, so don't worry about memorizing all these, which is a community-sourced project where people upload color palettes. It's normally made by designers as well, so they already go together. Another great one is made by Adobe, and that's called Cooler. And that's at cooler.adobe.com. Now, the general theme of our app is about air travel, about airports and airplanes and that kind of stuff. So I just loaded up Cooler, and I typed in airplane and pressed enter, and it's brought back pages and pages of results. Now, I can sort these ones by popularity or by number of downloads or number of comments, all kinds of things like that. So I've had a little look through these and tried to find a color scheme that I like, and I have picked this one over here. Now, the reason I picked this one, which is just called airplane, is for a specific reason. If you notice, it's got a mixture of light and dark colors. Now, that's very important when you're picking a color palette for an app, because you need to have sufficient contrast between your background and your foreground. So if you pick one that's all kind of really strong colors, like say this airplane lights in the middle there, you're going to find it quite hard to read the text on the page. So try and go for a good balance there. You'll also notice that airplane has got some nice shades of blue and like an off-white. Then it's got this gold color in the middle. So I call that my power color. So that is what I'm going to use across my app as my kind of signature color. So calls to action or elements of my brand, or maybe even my tiles, for example, could be in those colors. And that is, we know that color matches with those colors because it's a professionally designed palette. But if we say we wanted to use a different color as our primary color and wanted Cooler to generate a load of others for us, we can actually go into the Create panel, and in the middle, we can put in a color that we like using an eyedropper or whatever. So say like, I know, magenta, for example. And then there's a whole set of rules up there on the left. Yeah, pink. There's a whole set of rules there on the left-hand side that you can click on. It will generate color palettes for you. And at the bottom, there's all your hex values, there's all your RGB values, so you can just pull those out and start putting them into your app. Now, the best way to do this is to create a set of brushes in your app.xaml that you then reuse across your entire app. And this stops you, or at least discourages you from creating new colors and creating new brushes in your app. It keeps you focused on this single palette. So Tom's going to show us how to do that now in Blend. Oh, Visual Studio, sorry. I'm just so used to saying Blend that Visual Studio scares me a little bit.
So I'm going to go ahead and create a solid color brush. I'm going to give it a key. I'm going to call it Sky Blue. And Dave has the color for me.
The color, Tom, is FF.
Well done.
Oh.
Yeah.
51,
Yeah.
69, C2.
Cool.
C2.
Oh.
Not 72.
Thanks. So I've gone ahead and created my solid color brush in here. And then if I go ahead and open this up in Blend, who here's uses Blend with their apps?
I want to see a lot more hands when I ask that question next time around. So Blend, and some of you may write off Blend as a tool that's purely designed for designers, but actually it can save you a ton of time doing stuff. So things like building storyboards or working with a visual state manager, all that kind of stuff is done in a really easy to understand GUI, and it generates a ton of XAML behind the scenes. It would take you guys hours to code by hand. So there are some really good reasons to use Blend. Also, you can preview your designs in the light theme, dark theme. You can even pick different accent colors as well, and all render without you actually having to deploy the app or run it. So it's a super useful tool to use.
It tends to be task-based, so for more coding, we stick with Visual Studio, but when we're working on the UI, we tend to switch into Blend, so we tend to switch in and out of them.
Yeah.
You'll see here that the sky blue color has appeared in my app.xaml, so now it's available across my entire app for me to choose. We're going to add the rest of the palette. I'm not going to type it all out here. I'll just paste them in, but you can see where we are. So you can see them appearing here down the right-hand column.
And when the power, obviously you guys know all about styles and resources. There's nothing like groundbreaking for you guys there. But the power of putting these things into styles and resources means that if you decide to change your mind about one of these colors later on, your entire app will get updated across the whole space, provided you always use these styles and resources. It's kind of like, well, it's effectively CSS for XAML. So we definitely encourage you using it, even for simple things like this. OK.
So we can go in here, and then we can start applying the colors here. So if I click on those, and then I can select a different foreground. And then in my panel down here on the left-hand side, so here I'm setting a foreground to the sky blue, and that means that all of my headers now start to take on that sky blue from the palette that we've selected from Kula.
And again, 2 or 3 clicks, and you've written, you know, style equals static resource, blah, 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 just by doing a couple of clicks. So it also does save you time doing this kind of thing. You can do some of the stuff in Visual Studio, but Blend just makes it a little bit quicker. Cool.
Cool.
So we have now put the colors into our app, and we've created some brushes for those. The next one is to find yourself a font. Now, again, in the panel discussion earlier, somebody was saying, oh my God, there are no good resources for finding fonts. They need to be royalty-free. You need to be able to embed them, all that kind of stuff. So we'll get onto some resources for that. But you might say, hang on a minute. You use Segoe UI across your platforms, across phone and across 8 and across Xbox and everywhere. So shouldn't I be using Segoe UI? You'd be surprised the number of times I get asked this by people. But Segoe UI doesn't always really make sense, especially if you're trying to build your own brand. For example, the New York Times just doesn't really work in Segoe UI. It would look much better in its own type, wouldn't it? So this is something you need to consider when you're building a brand or building a personality for your app, is to consider bringing it in your own typeface. You don't have to do it, and Segoe UI is a beautiful typeface in its own anyway, but it's good to look at what your options are. And you wouldn't, with New York Times, you wouldn't want to have that text be the body text. You wouldn't want to read an article in that, like, you know, size 12, whatever. But so you'll be surprised how well Segoe UI actually partners with other fonts, such as this quite ornate New York Times one. So you may be able to have like top of your panorama in New York Times and the content all written in Segoe or something like that. Now, one of the great resources I like to use is one called Font Squirrel, fontsquirrel.com. Now, these guys pride themselves on looking for fonts that can be used everywhere, that are commercial-free and royalty-free. Again, just because this is a Microsoft talk, I've got to say the caveat, always check the licensing first, just so you don't come back and sue me. But generally, they're a great place to go for fonts. And you can see they've got hundreds already, but at least they're all collected in one place, and it saves you the effort of trawling sites, because fonts do tend to be quite expensive. So we had a little look, and I love this one here called EXO. I think it quite nicely embodies the kind of excitement of air travel. It's got some nice lines that all kind of point in a diagonal direction there. And it comes, yeah, it's a bit retro as well. And it comes in a ton of different weights as well. So we have light ones, we have heavy ones, and it's great. So Tom's now going to show us how to embed the font into the app. Now, this can be a little bit of a tricky thing, but we found a nice, quick, and easy way of doing this.
There are different ways of doing it. We're going to use Visual Studio in this scenario. Cool. So I'm back here in Visual Studio. I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call that fonts. I'm going to add my font. So I've already installed my, my font onto this machine, so that's quite important to do, that you install it locally so that you can see it in the designer. But now we need to install it so it's part of the app so you can view it. And then on my desktop here, I'm going to go to EXO. And we're not going to use all of these, but I'll just put them in for now. These are going to be added. And then I need to select them all.
You can see down there as well.
Oh, thank you. And then I need to set the properties. So I need to change the property from build action from none to content.
If you try and use Blend's inbuilt font manager, sometimes this just doesn't work, and we don't know why, which is why we're showing you, rather than sending you around in circles, going through search engines trying to figure out how to do it from Stack Overflow, we thought we'd show you the direct way of doing it.
Yeah. And then I'm going to go back into my app.xaml, and I'm going to define the fonts. Again, it will be, we want to define the fonts in here so that we can apply them across all of our different, all of the different texts, and if we need to change something, we can do it in the app.xaml rather than have to go ahead and do it on every single page. I'm not going to code for you guys right now, but I will put in the font family here, and I'll talk you through it. So I've created a new font family. I've given it a name right here, and then I've put in the path. And then this end bit here with the pound sign and then giving the, font, the name of the font family, that's quite important. That's what kind of makes it all come alive, and so you can see it. And then if I go into my, So I open this up in Blend, so I'm going to go to my main page. Oh, yes, please. And then I go into this, oh, excuse me. And then I go into the template here. So I'm going to go into this list box, and then we go into the item template, and then we go into the various sections here, and then I can go ahead and apply a style. So because I put it into my app.xaml, it's now available.
It's a font style, Tom.
Sorry.
A little dot.
This one. Oh, sorry. There we go. Excuse me about that.
It's a bit of
Going
demo
the wrong
nerves,
way
you know how
around,
it
yeah,
goes.
yeah.
You practice these things for about 10 hours, and then on the day you get a bit nervous.
So here, by selecting it with from the resources here, it's applied right away. I can do the same with the panel items here. So if I go ahead and edit a header template, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. And I'll take that out, and I'll replace it with a text box. And then I just need to switch into the code quickly and bind that back to the template. So I'm going in, and that's picking up what I put onto the template. And then I can go ahead. We're going to make these a little bit smaller for this app. So maybe I think it's 18. And then we can change the color again from our resources panel here. So we can go to gold. And then I'll go ahead and apply the style that we've got.
If you're building a large app, you probably wouldn't want to be setting the font style and the color through styles every time you do this. You probably create a whole text block style which would incorporate both those two styles that you can use based on to make that a little bit easier.
So I can go ahead now and apply all of those styles to the various different panels. So again, it's quite quick to roll out the design across your app. And then if I was to run it, you can see here the app is already starting to move away from the standard template, just by adding some colors and some new fonts.
So we're starting to get a personality, but it's still missing something which is pivotal, really, to establishing an identity of a brand or of an app, and that is a logo. So see, now we've got our beautiful font that we have in here. So again, you may say to me, I'm not a designer, where can I get a logo? Now, imagine you haven't seen this talk. You may sit down in front of your machine, you think, okay, I know, there's this graphics package that comes with Windows, and it's free, and maybe I could use that. No. No Paint, no. Whilst Paint is great for like editing a few little bits and pieces here, maybe cutting and cropping and things like that, it's not a tool to be creating graphics in, particularly things like logos, which are going to be used across your app and across your tiles and things like that. So please try not to use MS Paint for that. Saying, dang, okay, so you've taken Paint off my hands, what do I have left? Well, I know there's this thing called clipart that lives inside Office. No, please don't do this. We sometimes have a bit of a giggle when we're looking through the store or the marketplace, and we see all these app icons full of screen beanies or like really kind of cheap free clip art. It doesn't scale well, particularly the more complex ones, and it just looks like you don't really care about the app that you're building. And remember, this is like your app tile is your front door to your app. So if you want to give people a good impression of your app's going to be like, and it is also the first thing they see on the search results screen, you want to invest a bit more time in it. Okay, so I've already cut off Paint from you, and I've cut off clip art from you. What else do we have left? I know, let's do an image search and get some stock imagery. No. Sorry, no. Again, with images, you've got all kinds of problems with copyright, all that kind of stuff. The good stock imagery costs money, despite what people may think. But again, we also run into these scaling issues. It just doesn't work. Having an app logo or an app icon, which is this tiny little pixely image, just looks bad. And the last thing we want to see is this really happening in the store. Now, these are all fictional examples that I've made up. And it's actually, after you spent, well, I've been designing Windows Phone apps since before the platform launched, so about 3 years now. And it was actually quite hard to design a bad icon after being meticulous for 3 years. We see here we have one that's using a piece of clip art with some bold italic Times New Roman in horrible text over the top of it. We've got a screen beanie that doesn't even fit the tile properly, so we've got some bands either side of it. I've seen so many icons for apps that have been hand-drawn in Paint that you wouldn't believe. And every time I see one of those, I want to kill myself or somebody else for doing that. And the final one is probably the worst offender in my eyes, and that is, let's just use something that's on a different platform and just shoehorn it in there. So this is not only using some crappy clip art at the behind it, it's then also got these shines on it, these rounded corners and all that kind of stuff. And if shines are a really big part of your brand, then fair enough. You know, we don't say no shines, no glass, that kind of stuff. But if you're just doing it for the sake of it, just don't do it. Same with rounded corners. That's going to look really weird on somebody's start screen. It's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And remember, these guys have paid hundreds of dollars, invested 2 years of their life on this platform. Like, you need to respect their choice to a certain degree.
Did you say they were fictional?
These are all fictional, yeah. But if any of your app tiles do look like this, I'll be watching you, okay? So there's not really many paces left after I've cut all these avenues off for you. But there is some hope, and that is in the form of a fantastic website that I use quite a lot called the Noun Project, which a lot of you probably heard of. Now, the great thing about this site is it's all community-contributed icons. Some of them are free, some of them aren't free, some of them have got attribution licensing, some don't. It's very important you check the licensing first. Some of them are public domain images, which is absolutely fantastic. They have a subscription, they have all the different ways you can buy the content from them as well. So, but I typed in airplane, and I got like hundreds of results back, and they are already two-dimensional and single color. And if you buy a couple of them, you know, you can combine them and play with different ideas and that kind of stuff. So it's a great resource to go from. But again, check licensing. So I had a little look through here, and I quite like this airplane here. And it just so happens it's also public domain. So it's free for me to use. I don't have to attribute anybody, and I don't have to pay for either, which is amazing. So now we've got a little icon. A logo is much more than an icon. But we also have our nice font, and we have our colors. So let's maybe join these things together in some kind of branding element. So I've taken our Blue Yonder name of our app and put it into our font, and I've applied the colors that we use. I've just made the blue slightly lighter, made the Yonder darker, and I thought, I want to incorporate that plane somehow. So I'm just going to put that above my E, and now I have an app logo. Really quick. Thank you for the few little ripples. That'll be the designers in the room, won't it? Yeah. So it's a really simple thing to do. And for your tile, you could take that plane on that blue background, or you could take the B and the Y in the plane and use that as your app tile. You don't have to use a full piece of text if you don't want to. You can simplify it down. Because remember, it's your brand you've just invented, so it's yours to do with what you like. So Tom's now going to drop this logo we've created into the app.
So we're back in our panorama control here. So if I right-click here and edit the template, that'll take me into the template for the panorama, which is made up of the background layer, the title layer, and the items layer. So we're going to go ahead and add the logo that Dave's created. So I've already added it to this solution, so it's under my Assets and Images folder. And the Blue Yonder logo is right there. Oh, that's too many. Blend sometimes adds these really bizarre margins. I'm just going to get rid of those for a second. And we're going to set the stretch, and this is quite important, to uniform. Or in the majority of cases, when you're adding images to your solution, they should be set to uniform or uniform to fill. There's very few scenarios I can think of where you would use fill, because you'll end up with a load of stretched images. So I'm going to move this, and I'm going to move that into my title layer. And then I'm going to set the height. I'm going to give it some margin here to make sure it's aligned with everything. It's quite difficult to see because Dave's put in the, Dave's got a white background, but all will become clear in a few minutes.
Yep. There's method to this madness, you say.
So if I skip back out of this template, and then I change the background color here, you can see, oh, that's the back color. You can see that.
Sky blue.
There you go, that's a bit better.
Yeah, so the logo's
there's the logo there. And then we play around with the margins, so we just position it properly so it's aligned with the rest of the content. And then again, like now we've added our fonts, now we've added our colors, and now we've just finally added our logo. We're starting to move the app away from the standard template a bit further. And because I placed it into the items template, as I move my finger across the screen off the panorama, it also animates, so you get that nice parallax effect as well with your logo.
So far, all we've done is pick a few free resources, slap them into some resources, pop them into the app. And already we've moved away from this template thing. The structure is still the same, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. It's got a bit more of its own personality to it. So let's look at step 4, which is add a background, or some kind of background branding piece to it. Now, Tom's just showed you there putting a solid color in. That is absolutely fine. Great if you can pick it from your palette as well, but if not, white, or as a designer, I prefer slightly off-white, slightly off-black, because I'm just fussy like that. It's a good thing to introduce. Now, if you're working with a big brand, they may have some kind of simple pattern to use in the background or something like that. If you're making it up yourself, again, there are some things you can use. So what should I do? Now, how do you think this is going to go? So you may think, lovely bit of stock imagery to put in the background there. Nope, we don't want that. Look at all these beautiful stock images, but they're just cheap. And we don't want to see this really behind the panorama control, or behind any control particularly, unless you really need it there. There will be times when you maybe have to use a brand image there, or piece of brand artwork, or a simple pattern, or a gradient or something, and that's all fine. This is just generally what I would like apps to move away from, is this insistence to use a piece of stock imagery for the background. I know I'm in a stocks and shares app. I don't need graphs in the background. I'd rather focus on the content on the screen there. While we're talking about graphics and imagery, and Tom just mentioned it a moment ago when we talked about scaling, something that I see quite a lot when I'm browsing through apps is a case of Fathead. And this is Fathead. Yep, you all know it. When you put an image into your app and you just stretch it and don't think about it. And maybe it's because I'm a designer, but this really grinds my gears when I see this going on. And even with shapes, when you see circles that have been turned into ellipses and squares that become rectangular, it just looks like you don't care about the app that you're spending your time building. So just really think about spend a little bit of effort doing it. Now, for those of you who aren't quite sure how to do this, if you are in a graphics package, pretty much any graphics package, and you're resizing something, if you hold down the Shift key when you're resizing from the corner, it will maintain aspect ratio. So you'll never end up with fat heads or skinny people. You'll be sorted. If you're putting things into image boxes on XAML, like Tom showed you just there, you probably want to be using either uniform or uniform to fill. So uniform will keep the proportions and will not use any extra space. Uniform to fill is quite useful if you're building avatars, because maybe you always want to have those in a square box, but the avatar might not necessarily be a square image. If you use uniform to fill, it will crop it, but still maintain the aspect ratio as it resizes. So 2 very important properties I wish people would use a lot more when they're building apps. So anyway, back to our Blue Yonder app now. We're going to be putting in a background. And for this, I'm just going to use something really, really simple. And there's loads of different ways you can do this. I'm going to take 2 of our brand colors and just a little random skewed rectangle. Now, you can do this in pretty much any graphics package. If you don't want to make it skewed, you can make it straight. It's entirely up to you. But all I'm going to do is add these 2 things together and end up with this. Just a blue banner with a gold underline underneath it. Really, really simple. So Tom is now going to add this background into our app.
So we're back on our panorama again. We're going to go into the template. So I'll edit the template that we put the logo in earlier. And the template here is made up of a grid, and we're going to put our background into the top header here, so into this row 0. So again, I'll go into my assets folder, into images, and then I'm going to select my header. I'm just going to put some crazy margins in again. I'm just going to take those off. And again, setting this to uniform in this case. And I suppose just zoom out so we can see what's going on. So you can see here at the moment it's spread across all of the 3 across the 2 rows, and that's because the row span here is set to 2. So if I bring this down and then set the height, nothing will be seen.
I need to go more up.
Still not coming through.
Random demo bug. Good job we have one we prepared earlier.
I think it's actually Blend playing up. I think it has actually gone in.
Okay.
If I put it in now, it should come on. I'm hoping. No.
No. Well, we do have one we made earlier in true Blue Peter style. And while Tom's getting up, who actually knows what Blue Peter is? Yeah. Okay, come and see me afterwards. I've got a prize. For those of you who don't know, Blue Peter is a kids' TV show that's been running for about 25 years in the UK, and they always show you how to make something like Tracy Island or whatever, but because they only have like 5 minutes to demonstrate it, they always go, and here's one I made earlier, and put that on the top of the stage. So that's effectively what's happened here. Okay, there we go.
So we can see now the header's been put in. I'll try and work out in a second when Dave's talking why that didn't work, and then I'll be able to explain to you. But you can see here we've got the header in, and then we've positioned the items below so that as you move across, it kind of has this kind of cool effect because this background's going kind of up has an angle on it.
Yeah, it's like you're taking off with the aircraft.
So everything is animated just because I placed it into that template there.
Cool. So that is the real basics about kind of injecting a brand into an app, but we're going to take it a little bit further now. Now, I've just finished doing another series of videos for Develop and Nokia on design consultations. In fact, I think some of you in the audience now. And some of the things that we've been talking about, particularly this time around, is how to lay information out so it's a bit easier to consume and a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to take you through a couple of steps now to help with that, because a lot of you, I'm guessing, have got relatively data-intensive apps or that show quite a complex piece of information. And when I've done talks in the past, a lot of people have come back to me and said, oh, this is all great if you're working with an app that's got, you know, beautiful imagery and videos and all that kind of stuff. But my app's to deal with stocks and shares, or in this case, you know, airport departures and arrivals. So it's not exactly the most beautiful information to do. But you can still do things to make it look better and make it easier to read. So we're going to go through some quick steps now. So is there a better way to lay this information out? If you see what we're looking at here, we have applied a little bit of styling to it already. It's just a flight number, its status, where it's come from, and where it's going to. If you see that in a list, all below it, you saw when Tom ran the app there, it's not the easiest thing to consume, the easiest thing to read. It's not particularly a great use of space either. So let's think about what the most important information is here. It's probably going to be the flight number and its current status. So maybe let's play with how we lay that out. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop that delayed status up next to the flight number. And that helps to kind of use a little less space. I've also started to color code the airport codes in a different color to the times, which means that as I'm scanning down this list, if you compare the left with the right there, as I'm scanning down the list, I can much easily pick out the departure and arrival airports from the rest of the content in the list item. So let's just adjust the layout a little bit more to make it easier to consume. So here, I'm going to move the times onto the same line as the airports. Really simple things. This still doesn't look great here, but bear with me. But already we're making our list items smaller, and we're making them easier to see. So now as we go through this, we can see 8:15 is delayed, Oceanic Air 8:15. We can see it's coming from Sydney at 8 o'clock, it's due in LAX at 18:20. We can read down, we can read across in quite a quick way. So next thing we're going to do is to split into two columns, because it is actually quite difficult to kind of consume that in one easy piece. So we're just going to split that across into two columns. So now as we scan down our list, we can easily see a list of statuses down one side. So we can see delayed on time, delayed on time, just by easily scanning down the right-hand side. And by scanning down the left-hand side, we can see our flight numbers. So a little nice way of doing that. But I still think there's more we can do to this. So let's add a little visual indicator to show what stage a flight's in, because a flight may be in progress, it may be late taking off, or it may be delayed landing. So for that, I'm just going to take another icon from the Noun project, again, one of the ones that's freely available and usable, put it into one of our brand colors, in this case, our Power Color Gold, and just put a few little dots in here. Now, you could just use a templated progress bar for this. Really, really simple thing to do, and then it could actually be, you could bind that to the percentage through the trip it is, or anything like that, and make it a little bit more interesting and dynamic there. So now we can see that our plane is en route. It's delayed, though. But let's give it a little bit more hierarchy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to increase the size of the OA 815 to make it a little bit more obvious. And then I'm also going to reduce the size of things like delayed and the LAX and put them onto one line as well. So we're making that a little bit more concise and a little bit easier to see there as well. And I've taken off the two different colors of the departure and arrival airport because it starts to get a little bit too colorful there, and I'm using bold instead. So if we look down this thing now, our eye is immediately drawn to the OA 815, We then have this little dotted line which takes us over to the status on delayed, and then below that we can see two easy things that show the arrival and departure airports and the times. And we can tell the difference between what the airport and the times are by the fact that one's in bold and one isn't. But there's still a few finishing touches I want to do to this. So I've got a little thing there. I want to make it a little bit easier to tell when something's delayed, because I really want delayed flights to stand out to me. The on-time flights I'm not too concerned about, so that information doesn't need to shout. So what I'm going to do for that is just put it in a little box. So we've evolved, to recap, a list layout that used to look like this one on the left into exactly the same information on the right-hand side. And now I've got something that's much more space efficient, has exactly the same information there. In fact, it's got more because it also shows the indicator of how far through the flight it is. And it's much easier to consume, and also, more importantly, for me at least, looks a hell of a lot better when we put it into our panorama control with a bunch of other ones. So Tom has got that to show you now.
Yep. But before we do that, I've realized what the issue was with the header earlier. So down on the right-hand side here, the horizontal alignment wasn't set to left, and because we're in the grid, it was just positioning itself off the screen, so that's why we couldn't see it. Yay. But back to the task at hand. So here we have our list. And again, this is bound up to the sample data that I created earlier. That's just here. And then within that, we have an item template that I created where we're binding the individual elements. And rather than build up the template from scratch here, because it's quite complicated, I've actually already created one, but I'm going to go ahead and apply it, and then I'll talk you through it. So I'm going to apply the resource, and I'm going to apply the watch list item template to this list. And you can see straight away it's switched into that design that Dave's come up with. And if I go into that template, you can see how I've made it up. So I've used a grid. The grid is made up of 3 columns, which are set to stars, and then we have an auto in the middle. I've just moved those text boxes into those different columns and also the different rows. And then to create the delayed and the on-time box here, I've just used a checkbox because it's got an on or off state, and it's bound to the Boolean of true or false.
Now, this is an important point to raise. When we sit down with devs and we talk about things like custom states to show between on time and delayed, or in the case of the aircraft, whether it's taking off or in progress, if you say to them, oh, we're going to need a converter for this, to flick between 2 images, blah, 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 if you look at the controls that are already available to you and the properties that you want from them, the chances are you're going to find something already. So the checkbox and radio buttons, for example, have 2 states to them, true and false. So if you actually edit that template and throw away all those circles and squares and just drop in those 2 different images, in the state manager pick which one you show when it's true and which one it's false, you can now just bind to a true-false value without writing any converters and any code. It's just so much easier than actually spending that time. Same as I said before, if you want to have the aircraft thing as something a little bit more dynamic, you could just template a progress bar and turn the thumbtack into the aircraft and the background into the dots. It just saves you so much time rather than custom code and custom controls and this and that.
Cool. So that probably took me about 20 minutes to get right. I was tinkering with the kind of margins and things like that to actually get it to look how I wanted it to look in the template, but it was pretty quick to do. So let's go and look at the before and after. So if we take a look at step 1, where we just had a basic template with a few colors in. Oh, I didn't do that. We've just got a basic logo here, but what we also did was go away and do kind of before and after. So Dave put together a more comprehensive design, and I went away and sort of applied it in Blend. It probably took me about four hours, I would say. And when we had a bit more time and a bit more thought into it, and this is kind of what we came up with. So we've still got the similar header and the logo across the top and the watch list, and then we've gone ahead and created a new data template for the airports to make that a lot easier to read.
Now, all I did here was exactly the same process that we went through for those other list items. I thought, what is the most important thing we need to see here? So first of all, I want to make it obvious which airport it is, so that's all nice and large now. And then I thought about how I'm going to lay out my arrivals and departures in a way that's easy to consume, that's nicely laid out, and makes use of our brand colors and typefaces as well.
And then the third section, where we had like those squares before with the features that were news articles, we started to think about how we can kind of create some wow factor with our app. And so we put in this here, we've created a horizontal panorama item. We've put in an image here, and then we've got the the highlight of the text that comes through. So you can see here that we've got kind of a varied panorama, which we would encourage because it makes it easier to navigate because users know where they are. And then we've created this kind of hero section.
The reason we did this is because whenever people try and build news feeds or news items in their apps, they tend to just use lots of little squares or maybe slightly larger rectangle with like the headline underneath it. And you don't have to be bound by those conventions. You can do something a little bit more interesting and a little bit more different. So that's why we use that big hero image a little bit like Bing News uses, and we just put that article next to it. And rather than having like 3 articles in that one pane, we just have the one, nice and focused. If we wanted to, on the following pane from that, we could have a list of maybe 3 news items there if we wanted to. But the whole point here is to play with the layout a little bit more. You don't have to be bound by the way that it's done in the native OS. Because the native OS is there as your framework to build on top of. Just as you build apps on top of it, you can build the design app as well. So in summary, I realize we whistled through that, and we're running quite tight on time as well. You don't have to be a designer to start building a brand. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you want to build an amazing brand, you probably should work with a design team. And in the interest of not putting me and Tom out of jobs, designers are great. Please employ them and pay us. But these are some quick tips and easy tricks that you can apply across the apps that you're building. And you saw from what we're doing here, it didn't take as long to actually click these things in together. I realize there's a little bit of magic here and there in terms of time saving. You'll probably spend more time just scrolling through the icons and the colors to find ones that you like, rather than scrabbling around trying to find something on the internet. So I did promise you a list of resources. These are not, by all means, all the resources. They're just the ones I happen to know and love. There'll be a bunch of other ones out there. Again, the thing that I always say, always check licensing before you use something, just in case things have changed since I presented this to you. These slides are obviously going to be available to you on Channel 9 as well after you've been here, so the resources will be up there as well. Now, we want to leave you with some inspiration as well before we go away. So we're going to show you some of our favorite examples on the platforms as well. So there's all the cameras in the air. Okay, I'm going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's look at some great examples.
So first of all, we wanted to look at some examples that we picked up that go across Windows and Windows Phone. And actually, the first one also has an example on Xbox. What we really love about Netflix is that they've got this brand and they've consistently applied it across all of these various Windows and Xbox apps. You can see there they've got the logo that we talked about and some of the icons. They've brought in their color palettes. They've also brought in some of their backgrounds on their Windows Windows app, and they've kind of got this consistent look. They've created a design for each form factor, so for phone, for tablet, and for Xbox. But they've got this kind of consistent approach to the design as you move through them. This is Hulu Plus, which some of you may be familiar with. It's for those of you who aren't based in the US. It's a video-on-demand service for phone and for Windows 8. It's also a major website. They have, you might not be able to necessarily see it with the fidelity of the projector we've got here, but they have on the Windows 8 app this big kind of carousel that flicks images upwards and downwards as it scrolls through them. So rather than having like those ones that are all boxed in with little dots across the bottom, which is quite hard to work in, and also if you were to go horizontally across the page, you'd have gesture competition with scrolling the hub. They decided to go perpendicular to that and have it going up the screen. And they carry the exact same thing through to the Windows Phone app. That same little interaction, the same little control. It's styled a slightly different way, but it helps to tie the brand together as well. Another really great example that we love is Great British Chefs. Unfortunately, we don't have time to show it to you today, but I do encourage you to go and download it. In particular, it's really great at its animation design. It's come up with custom animations for for both their Windows and Windows Phone apps. So when you click on things, they have these really nice motion effects to bring in all of the images and then later on in the recipes. So I'd encourage you to look at that. And again, like they're applying their brand colors, which is quite black and white. They're relying on the brand the photography of the food there, and then their logos. They've also used a different grid. So we do talk about our standard grid that we use across our Windows Phone and Windows 8 design, but provided you are breaking away from it intentionally and you're respecting whatever you've created instead, go crazy, do what you want there. We always tend to preach, for Windows Phone at least, side margin of 24 pixels, that's obviously going to change in 8.1, and spacing of 12 pixels, that kind of thing. But if you want to use 30 and 15, you go for it. Just be consistent across your own app. For those of you who've seen me speak before, you know that my biggest bugbear, besides Comic Sans, is poor alignment.
Like, you can tell if something's not in line, just hold a post-it up to the screen, and if it's not in a straight line, fix it. It's really simple to do. It's the first thing users think looks bad about an app. One of my personal favorites, because I'm a bit of a social media kind of guy, is Foursquare. And again, they've broken away from the grid here and done their own thing. But they keep kind of reinforcing this kind of tile appearance. They use their blues, they use some little gap. They've even customized the back button here to look like the Foursquare check, which is on their app tile. So they've really thought about the quirky little ways they can introduce their brand elements into their app. And it still feels like a very good Windows 8 and Windows Phone app, but it's still very customized as well. Cool.
So let's take a look at some Windows examples, again, very quickly. The first one is a Microsoft app. It's the alarm clocks. Again, they're using all of the Microsoft brand color palettes. What we really like about this app, though, is that they could have just had a load of drop-downs, but they've decided to go with something a bit more innovative. They've got these radio controls where you can set the hour and the minutes. So we really like that.
And again, you may be thinking, oh my God, there's radio controls, a massive amount of work to do. But a little bit of templating of a slider control and a radial transform on there, and that is sorted. Like, they don't have to be these massive custom pieces of work to do. You can just template existing controls to do this.
Cool. Dave's favorite is coming up next. Disney Princess Dress Up. We really like this app. We don't know why, really.
We don't. We know why from a design perspective.
We know why from a design perspective. We just found it fun.
We got a lot of laughs out of this because we used to run a service called App Fast Track that helped our partners who are building these kind of big name apps, and we used to have to review them and write reports back. And one of the things you do in this app is actually you have to take a selfie and then choose a princess's body to put it on. And it was an app that I was scheduled to review. So it went around the review team with my face on the top of this princess's body. So that's why it's now a thing in our team about me loving this Disney app. It wasn't a good look.
Yeah. But the thing we like about this app is that they're still using kind of the Windows hub here, but the Disney Princess Dress Up is a really great app, but it's kind of really immersive, and they've got this really strong brand. And so you can see here they've got that logo across the top there. They've got some strong backgrounds that they're bringing through. They've got all of these crowns that kind of they sit all of the princesses in. They haven't gone with tiles. We don't have to have tiles. In this app, it makes sense not to move away from tiles to make it more feel like a friendly Disney app. And then when you move into the storyboard mode, it just goes into a familiar flip. I think this is the flipping control.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we are running right up against time. These are some more resources that will be useful to you. You probably know them already because I think they've been shown in a bunch of other talks. There are massive resources on design.windows.com and dev.windowsphone.com/design, so please do check them out. Finally, there are prizes for feedback. I think there's some kind of draw that gets done. So please fill out eval forms. The good numbers are the good numbers for us. I guess that's clear. You can take the QR code from there, or you can go to the website and do it from there. But we have 3 minutes. We have a stack of prizes. If anybody's had any questions, please come to the mic so everybody can hear. And hey, Tim.
Hey, Dave, Tom. Thanks a lot. A lot of great tips. Thank you very much. I don't think I'm quite ready to put on my beret, but maybe in a couple months. I guess my first question is, how early in the process should I consider design? I know today you went through and already had a skeleton of the application and then made some changes from there. Should I begin even before that and start thinking even before I have my data in my application?
Well, obviously, we'd love you to start thinking about design at the very beginning, but there may be times when that isn't possible. So you may be revving an existing app where you have to retrospectively apply your brand. But if not, thinking about these things up front, and I was speaking to one of the attendees a couple days ago, I don't know if he's in this talk or not, about sitting down and starting from scratch and just sketching things out, particularly when you come to like laying out things in the list items that we talked about. Getting that kind of stuff revved on paper is much faster than revving it in your app. Same with looking for colors, looking for palettes, that kind of stuff. It's much easier to do it up front. But it's not the end of the world if you don't do it up front. We just prefer you to do it.
We do it up front when we're doing it.
We always do it up front. Because we have to go to our customers with a branded piece as well.
Thank you.
Cool.
Hi.
Just general question about design and approvals. I think earlier, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, I was seeing a lot of developers saying that they didn't get their apps approved because they were not going by the Metro design and so on. And I see now less and less of this happening. Is there still things that, if they're done, your app doesn't get approved, or are we more open and lenient? And
so 2 points there. As far as I was aware, Store never blocked apps from a design perspective, the aesthetic design, unless a user got locked and they couldn't navigate out or close or navigate out of the app. So I'm not sure where that's happened.
I can provide you examples later.
Okay, well, yeah. As I say, I did.
Speak to us later, and
we can have a look. Yeah.
we'll have a look at those. Yeah. As far as I'm aware, it's only technical things to store certification checks for.
With regards to the guidelines, they are guidelines. They're there to help you. We want people to innovate with the design language, but there is a basis to help you out from the start. But yeah, absolutely innovate.
All right, thanks.
No worries.
Hi there.
Hi, in the demo you combined the little plane with the text to make your logo. Now, we can't use Paintbrush. Do we need Photoshop, or do you have like an inexpensive tool to use?
So that is probably a good clarification point. When I was saying don't use Paint, that's more just for creating it from scratch. Like I said, for cropping, for moving things around, yeah, Paint can do that kind of stuff. I believe it works with transparent backgrounds. If not, there are some great tools like Paint.net, which is free and it's got a damn sight of the functionality that Photoshop does. It's a really great app for that. There's also the GIMP, which is an open source app, which is again very similar to Photoshop, and that'll do all that kind of stuff as well in there. So I recommend those two resources for you.
I'm sorry, we're going to have to stop questions, but Dave and I will be in the expert zone right after this. So come up to us then, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. I'm sorry that we're
And we'll
running
still
out
have a bunch of
time.
prizes as well there.
Yeah.
So it's all good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.